everything we do, going to work, play, recreation, involves interacting with an environment. So by defamiliarising those things, by looking for consciously for what is happening in our environment and how it can feed us emotionally and physically, we can sometimes identify the things that aren't working and make changes and make things better.
Right, good, hello, and welcome to Your Brain on Climate. I'm Dave, and this week I'm going to be chatting to author, novelist, academic and professional psychogeographer, Dr. Philippa Holloway. What-ifer? Psychogeography. Now, listen, sometimes on here we talk about things you immediately go, yes, I know what that is. Now, this is a bit different, right? So strap yourself in. Psychogeography, slippery thing. Hard to define, but very easy to feel it in your guts, I think. Think, right, about when you've been in a place you know it really well, but that place has felt different for some reason. Or about how when you walk around somewhere you know well, it almost feels like it's part of your memory and experience. It's not just a place, it's kind of part of you somehow. Or when you go around a corner and you remember what you were listening to on your headphones the last time you went round that corner. Your brain and places, about how your brain gets shaped by places, and, getting to the point, how those places get shaped by fossil fuels, which shapes our brains, and that we often don't even stop to think about that. And we don't stop to think about what's around us and what isn't. We don't stop to think and what it can do to the ideas that we have, including about things like climate change, when we do. That's psychogeography, kind of, sort of, and a lot more. So have a listen. This is an episode best relaxed into, like a walk without a plan through a bit of town you've never quite gone to explore before. Before we get started, this noise signifies wisdom. If you hear it, it means in the show notes there's a link to more information, so you don't have to stop the podcast and go and look up what the hell someone's banging on about. You can just read about it later. Philippa is a fascinating person. I was so pleased to have some of her time. Before we go on to talk about what psychogeography is and the work that she's done, the novel that she's written, the places she's been, and what she thinks about how walking and thinking in a different way can completely change how we think about climate change. Before any of that, we're going to talk about a thing she's done that I am weirdly envious of and also very pleased I haven't done. She's been to Chernobyl. She's been to the exclusion zone inside Chernobyl. She's wrote a blinking book about it. And if the very idea of that just makes you feel a little bit tingly and odd, and probably psychogeography is for you.
Your brain on climate.
So you've done a thing, which firstly doesn't sound very safe, but secondly you've done a thing which I would love to do, but I don't know quite why I'd love to do it. You've been to that there Chernobyl exclusion zone, right? What is that? What's it like in there?
It's uncanny. That's the first feeling that I had when I was there. So I went there to do research for the novel that I was writing and for my PhD, which was looking at effectively how nuclear landscapes might affect people's feelings and behaviour, and how that might help me develop a narrative and characters for the novel I was writing. So I'd done loads of research before I arrived. I'd looked at pictures, videos, played video games that are set in the exclusion zone. So when you get there, it's really familiar because You've already explored it. But of course, that sense of uncanniness is only from seeing snippets of it, from seeing representations of it. So the actual landscape itself and being in there and moving through it is a very different experience. So I can honestly say it's humbling, terrifying, sad, funny at times, mundane in places, really beautiful, devastatingly ugly at other times, a bit boring occasionally, quite exotic, because it's so different. So it's a really complex place, and it's so steeped in history and and the kind of the palimpsests of what's happened there, and the people who are still suffering. Palimpsests. So palimpsests are, it comes from the old term where people used to wipe the writing off vellum and write over it, but you'd often be able to see what was previously written, kind of faded behind it. So if you imagine it as a layering of meanings, if you think of the landscape in that way in Chernobyl, you've got these layerings of histories, of communities, signs and symbols within the landscape that show all the different experiences and stories that have happened overlaid over one another. So you see this real richness of some quite awful historical moments, but also some quite beautiful communities and people, and so it's complex, it's complicated.
What does uncanny mean to you? That you've used it twice, right? And it's funny. I think I know what it means, but you're using it in a very particular kind of way. What does it mean to you then?
That's a tricky one. So uncanny for me, it's really that sense of something familiar, but that's not quite right. So it's the equivalent of seeing somebody in a crowd who looks like you, and for a second you think you're seeing yourself, but you're not. It's just someone who resembles you. So it's an experience, a bit like déjà vu, where something is familiar to you, but it's also other and disconcerting and slightly off kilter. And so it gives us this kind of weird, spooky feeling, which is very much what I experienced there. I know this place, I recognise it, but now I'm in it, it feels uncanny, odd.
And is that all happening in your head, that kind of thing? Because one of the things when I see pictures of the Chernobyl exclusion zone on the telly, and you see people walking around with them Geiger counter things, and it kind of beeping, and then you walk over here and there's a little pocket of beep, and so you step out of that because it's bad, because you might get ill or something. And I wonder whether if I just picked you up and I plonked you in there, and I didn't tell you where it was, and you were just walking around it, whether it would just feel like anywhere else, or whether you're carrying into it this kind of all of your preconceptions and the beeps and the news and the story, and whether that's what's making it feel uncanny to you.
Yeah, so I think you kind of have to have an understanding of something for that uncanniness to trip. There has to be something that you recognise in it, some kind of sign that you recognise in it. So the interesting thing about going to Chernobyl is that you can't just go there. You can't kind of arrive there by accident, really. It would be very difficult. It's possible. I know it has to be possible because it kind of happens in the book I wrote, that someone does end up on the edge of it accidentally. But really, you have to go through quite a process of going there. And that process highlights to you the dangers, the risks, the complexities of going into that environment. So you're carrying with you a lot of conceptual information, ideas that you have, understandings, knowledge of the place that you're taking with you into that environment. I think depending on where in the zone you were placed, if you were just snatched out of one place and put there, you would have no idea that it was radioactive. You may not notice the subtle biological signs, like trees that have grown in a slightly different way, or the patterns on a bird's wing that show that they've developed over generations with levels of radioactivity in them. You might just recognise a forest, and you'd be likely to be more concerned about the fact that you were on your own in a forest and something might hurt you, or you might trip over, or you might get hungry or thirsty. However, if you were kind of appeared in one of the cities that is abandoned, in one of the towns that is abandoned, if you saw the radiation signs, you would probably have enough conceptual information to recognise there is something risky here, something invisible, intangible that I cannot see, but that is a danger to me. And it's that sense that you cannot perceive physically the levels of radiation. You need a mediating device, so the dosimeter or Geiger counter that does that reading, that tells you that there's something dangerous that might be harmful to you. With that, you're able to kind of read the landscape. Otherwise, you're not sure whether you're being penetrated by radioactive waves or not. So you have this to begin with, I had a low level kind of anxiety of, constantly being aware, is this dangerous? Is this not? I kind of, despite the fact I had sort of nearly 40 years of absolute fear of nuclear spaces since childhood, growing up in the 80s, remembering the Chernobyl disaster, the threat of nuclear war, very quickly I kind of acclimatized to that and accepted, well, I'm here now. There is that risk. So I might as well get on with it and just be careful. And that really surprised me that I would acclimatise so quickly. But when you're with your guide who goes there every day showing people around, you kind of trust that if they're taking you somewhere safe, or that if it's okay for them to be there, it's probably okay for you to be there. So I think we do adapt to how other people are behaving in an area as well.
It makes me think of COVID. It makes me think of that thing that happened when in March, April 2020, suddenly places and people that you didn't think twice about going to, right? Just like, going to the park or going to a shop suddenly became dangerous, and other people became dangerous. And nothing had changed. I mean, it's like, apart from the virus, which was, I guess, an unseen, secret thing in the background. But I remember thinking at the time how weird it was that the normal had become different. And then that became normal really fast as well.
Yeah. It took a while for us to acclimatise to it, but I had the same feeling. Going into a supermarket, suddenly there's this invisible threat that might be on the handles of a supermarket trolley or on an item on the shelves. And people getting too close and breathing near you was potentially life-threatening. And of course, we used protective equipment, we used face masks, we used distancing. We didn't have a dosimeter that could beep if someone with COVID got near us, which is the difference. But I think there are some real similarities there in that the intangible nature of the virus and the intangible nature of radioactivity, there's a connection there. And I did feel a sense of recognition in March 2020. It took me a few weeks to realise it, but I realised I was having those same emotional responses to place and people that I'd had when I first went into the exclusion zone. It was strange.
So is this what psychogeography is? I'm saying this as if I haven't just spent the last week reading everything there is to read. I think this is amazing, but psychogeography is it's simultaneously, right, if I understand it right, kind of this really profound, amazing thing about how, like, places aren't just places. If you are experiencing them as a human, they are all of the things that you bring to them, right? And that is every bit as important to the place. So it's that kind of that's quite profound, and it also seems quite mundane. It's like, well, obviously, so it's obviously the case, right? But is what we're talking about here aspects of psychogeography, like a place that is overlaid and imbued with all of the stuff we bring to it, which kind of fundamentally changes what that place is to us?
Yeah, that's definitely an element of it, completely. So psychogeography is a conscious awareness, a conscious study of how place affects our behaviour and feelings. And so there are two ways place can affect our behaviour and feelings. First of all, physically. So as we move through a place, the way it is designed, if you think of a city, they tell us where to walk and how to walk, when to stop and when to pause. If you think of traffic lights or zebra crossings, there are areas you're not expected to walk in or you're directed away from. A sign that says don't walk on the grass, so you stay on the path. So there are elements of the environment that we often, without consciously being aware of it, follow rules that are set for us through design. And to a certain extent, that happens in natural spaces as well. We will follow what looks like a path rather than pushing our way through the undergrowth. It makes sense. There's also, and obviously those things make us feel a certain way. If we're in a big bustling city, we might feel more anxious or depressed or closed in or excited by the hustle and bustle. So it has an effect on our emotions. But also we carry with us concepts. So for some people, going to a city is exciting. For some, it's really stressful. And that's based on our personality type. It's based on our past experiences of places like that. Maybe we've had a negative or a positive experience. We associate these spaces with different things. So we're always carrying with us, in every interaction with place, both an embodied response where our body and our feelings and our emotions and our behaviours are directed by that space, but also a conceptual response whereby our knowledge and our understandings of a place also affect our behaviours and our feelings.
Wow. And this matters why? Why should we study that?
Why should we study it? Because it's possibly one of the most fascinating things about being a human being. So we do not exist in a void. We do not sort of float around detached from the environment that we're in. Yeah. We're obsessed with place. We're obsessed with making our houses as perfect for us as individuals functionally, but also as spaces of emotion and connection. Everything we do, going to work, play, recreation, involves interacting with an environment. It's really, really easy to become so familiarised to an environment that we stop noticing its effect on us, or we stop noticing the beautiful things or the interesting things in that environment. And we end up going through the motions of, the commute to work, the walk to the shop, even just within our local community. So by defamiliarising those things, by looking consciously for what is happening in our environment and how it can feed us emotionally and physically, we can sometimes identify the things that aren't working and make changes and make things better. But we can also identify things that are really interesting and special and that feed us in a positive way. And sometimes we can change our behaviour in those environments and get a kick out of it. So psychogeography originally was quite a revolutionary, almost naughty thing to do.
It's all very French, isn't it?
Very French. So it involved sort of quite playful activities, like saying we're going to go for a walk, but we're only going to turn left. And we'll see where that takes us. Rather than following our usual path or where the road kind of suggests we should go, we'll only turn left. And then we find new places in a city that previously we only experienced a few streets. Now we're finding all these other places and seeing how we respond to those. I practice psychogeography. I think I've always done this kind of quite naturally, but I'm that person who will cut across the grass rather than following the path.
Oh, desire lines.
Oh,
I love desire
completely.
lines. Desire lines. That's that thing, isn't it? When there was that campus I read about, was it in America somewhere, where it was a new building and they had a big sort of quadrant, and in the middle of it they put loads of grass, and they didn't put any paths, and they waited a couple of years to see where people would choose to walk, and then they put the path there.
Yeah.
So they put that. I love that. That's great.
It's fantastic. We tend to follow paths that are already laid. However, I've always been the kind of person who will walk on the grass, not just because it's maybe quicker, but because for me, that change in texture under my feet feeds me in a different way. If you're constantly walking on paths and concrete, your body is getting one particular kind of feedback. If you then change and walk across soft grass through mud, the ground is slightly uneven, your balance has to adjust and shift. Your body becomes suddenly engaged in a whole sense with the natural environment and responds to that. You also might be more likely to pass under trees or close to shrubbery. You can reach out, you can touch a leaf, you can, trail your hand in the trees above, and you get this little break in the day that feeds you in a way that just following the crowd along the pavement or on the path doesn't give you. So it's kind of a rebellious act, but it's also to do with well-being and just getting a little kick out of the environment that you're in.
Yeah, it makes me... I heard this phrase in another podcast. Other podcasts are available, although obviously all inferior. And it was a phrase that was something like, freak out globally, act locally. So the basic idea being, like, if you're thinking about kind of the world all going to hell, that you can think that you can freak out about climate change and all of the problems and poverty and all this stuff, but you can still immerse yourself in the place that you live and draw immense richness from it, and it kind of being alive. And I think that's one of the reasons that I love your work, and what I've read about it is it feels very much about that to me.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about psychogeography is you don't have to see it as something that you have to set aside a whole day, go to somewhere unusual. You don't have to go to Chernobyl's exclusion zone. You don't have to go to a particular environment, the middle of Paris or a big city or ancient ruins. Psychogeography is something you can actually practice as part of your daily life. and in your community and in spaces that you're already familiar with. It's a way of seeing them and experiencing them anew. And it can be done in 5 or 10 minutes, or it can be that you set aside a whole day. By reconnecting with our local areas and landscapes, our villages and cities and wild spaces, the edge lands in between spaces, which is also really interesting, we can start to get an appreciation for the environment locally. And that will help us, I think, to develop a desire to protect that and to support it and to keep it clean and to make those small changes day to day. That the more people who do that, the more we do have then a global effect.
This is making me think that the things that we build then, the environments that we have, you've done a load of stuff about nuclear power stations, but not just nuclear power stations, like roads. I'm looking out the window here, I can see a main road with an horrible looking bus station on it, and tower blocks and power stations, other sorts of power stations and airports and the sort of places that we live in, which are all kind of linked to energy use and climate change and that sort of stuff, but they also are linked to us, right? Like, are we changed by, is something fundamental about the human brain and our experience changed by the environments around us?
I think so, yes, definitely. One of the things that I've recently come to discover, and I need to do a lot more research into this to unpick it a little bit, is the notion of praxis and anti-praxis. So praxis, there's multiple definitions of it, and different philosophers and thinkers have adapted it and applied it in many different ways. But praxis is effectively the act of doing. And it's the act of doing to create or change things for the self and other people. But with every act of praxis, there is a return. There is an anti-praxis, which is an often uncalled for side effect of what has happened. And this is something Jean-Paul Sartre really started to unpick and develop in response to Marxism. So if you consider we need power, so we dig up coal and we create a coal-fired power station. And this is brilliant. This is an act of praxis because suddenly people have electricity and they have energy. They have coal to burn. They have, power coming through. Fantastic. It's done something wonderful. The anti-praxis is we have people developing lung disease from working in the coal mines. We have tunnels collapsing, which kill people in the community. And we have pollution, which over decades has a really negative effect on the community.
Right.
So therefore, we have to create another act of praxis. So we develop nuclear power stations. Brilliant. The sky above a nuclear power station is always clear. There's no big black clouds bumping out. People walk in with nice clean faces and walk out with pretty clean faces. They're not clogged up with coal dust. However, the anti-praxis is we then have nuclear waste that needs to be contained, stored, has a half-life of, depending on what it is, so many years that, we've got this problem of how do we communicate to future generations not to open that tunnel or that barrel.
Oh, so cats, I know this. Radioactive cats. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have this issue where we've solved one problem. We've done something for the community, but then there's another act of anti-praxis. I'm very new to this, but it ties in so perfectly with my research that's the next probably 10 years of my life gone unpicking this. But it answers that question. When we act, something comes back, and that can be emotional, behavioural. So an act of praxis might be we create a beautiful park. The anti-praxis might be by creating that beautiful park, there's nowhere for homeless people to sleep, or we've got an area that is so poorly lit, people get mugged.
Yeah,
there's always an act of anti-praxis.
Think of the Welsh mining valleys, right, where there was whole communities built around coal, and then the coal goes away and all the jobs go away. And for the people that lived there for sort of generations to come, like, the coal is still there. It's still part of the experience of that place. The streets were designed around that community, and the cultural memory is there of it as well. But the coal isn't there anymore. But this stuff ripples all the way forward, right? And even if we got rid of all fossil fuel generating stuff right now in the whole world, I guess we would still be shaped by it. We'd still be shaped by the cars that we've driven and the roads that we've made and all of this stuff.
Yeah, completely. Those ththings will become a palimpsest conceptually, but also physically.
Like this word.
I know, new words are always good.
Yeah.
But also, I do think that if we have an awareness of praxis and anti-praxis, and if we have an awareness of our environment through psychogeography, maybe taking that next step can be more thoughtful and more carefully thought through. We have to accept that there will be possibly unforeseen things. I mean, you look at wind power and it's a fantastic green energy, but it's not without a carbon footprint, and it's not without potential
It changes the landscape, right?
On the landscape. I mean, it changes how it looks, but it also changes, vibrations in the water, issues with birds. There's always going to be something. I don't think there is a perfect solution, but I think there is progress, and the more thoughtful and mindful we are of that progress, both in terms of looking at what it can do for humanity and communities, but also how to make it so that the anti-praxis isn't so bad we're creating problems for future communities. I think that's the way forwards, and that gives me a lot of hope.
Your brain on climate.
I learned another new word when I was reading about psychogeography, which is the spectacle. I learned about a thing called the spectacle, which is this kind of captivating media political noise, the stuff we're all told to look at and shut up and buy and shut up and partake in, the Instagram and the social media and all of that stuff, and the economic growth and all of this kind of exciting, stimulating, shiny stuff, which, to varying degrees, from an environmental point of view, is kind of a massive problem, right? Because a lot of that stuff is driving climate changey activities, but it also stops us thinking about the other stuff because we're too busy working out what is the latest celebrities doing, or being told to buy stuff we don't need. And in a large part of what them French people were doing with psychogeography about smashing the spectacle by doing weird other stuff. And can we do some of that with climate change, please?
Yes, that would be fantastic. And I think what we're dealing with now, which the situationists didn't have to deal with in their time, is we're dealing with the internet. And the internet is the ultimate sort of
the situationists were they're the French,
the
Frenchy people that were going around doing original psychogeography.
Yes, in the sort of 1950s. So now we have this fantastic distraction in our pockets. We have smartphones. And people don't just sit and think or look anymore. You see people, as soon as they sit down to wait for something, their phone's out and they're scrolling. And it's wonderful in that it connects us with a lot of information, but it's also a sinkhole of quick snippets that don't really encourage deep thought or critical thought. And this is where you see sort of conspiracy theories arising, or people getting distracted by celebrity culture, or people going, I need to buy that, because we're presented with so much, just anything can end up on the internet, and any opinion. And people often do respond behaviourally and emotionally to what they see on the internet, but they don't pause and think critically and think deeply about what's really happening. So you can look at a headline about climate change and click like or don't like or angry face and say, that's awful. And then, the next thing you're looking at is an advert for a weight loss powder, and you're clicking like or don't like or, that's awful. And there's no pause for reflection. So I think the internet is the spectacle of now. That's a whole other kind of research that I really don't have time for, because I've got my new direction now in praxis and anti-praxis, and I think it would just make me angry.
But there is something I think about what Extinction Rebellion are doing, and what things, particularly Insulate Britain, right? Who sit on motorways and stop the traffic, and kind of one of the things. Okay, they're trying to piss people off, which they are doing, but they are also kind of going, see this motorway, we're going to stop you using that, and there's something about the kind of completely changing that bit of. That's a bit of geography. It's a bit of human architecture, and completely changing it. Right? Is that kind of thing necessary? Do we think for waking people up to climate change, kind of pointing out the extent to which our lives are physically shaped by fossil fuel-y stuff?
I can't say I'm pro or anti those actions, but I think those actions are interesting in the same way that you do, as if there is a kind of disruption enough to make people stop and listen, does that at least start a conversation? The problem is that the internet and the news cycle tends to move on very quickly. So how do we create a proper, deep, thoughtful conversation about those issues and not just get distracted by the latest headline or the latest crisis and move on having merely glanced off those problems? That's my concern.
One of the things, going right back to kind of going for a walk and always turning left, one of the things that I love about that kind of thing is how deliciously random it all feels, right? And we've all done things like that where we've gone for a random walk or just done a random thing, which has led to something really quite profound and important, feeling like it happens. And maybe almost like the universe was telling you a thing, right? Like you might go for your walk and turn left and bump into someone who you haven't seen for 20 years, who you then end up going for a drink with, who then, you end up starting a business with. And, and you will always go, oh, if something on that day made me turn left. And the reason I'm banging on in this rambly kind of way is because when we think about things like climate change, we're always obsessed with plans. We must have a plan. The government must have a plan. It must do this, spend that much money, have this target and do this kind of thing. But actually is a large part of what we maybe as people trying to navigate this crazy situation do, to just embrace the kind of unplanned a little bit more. And what does psychogeography have to teach us about just doing random stuff and seeing what happens?
I think it's very much to do with a heightened awareness and a defamiliarization of our usual patterns and behaviours and feelings. So once we re-engage with our local spaces and our local communities and the things that we do daily in terms of the food we eat, where we shop, whether or not it's locally produced, the state of the environment around us, if there's litter, if there's any way we can recycle. Once we start developing a clearer awareness of those things, we can start to make choices that are unplanned. We don't need to sit down and write a list of everything we should be doing, but we can start to value and recognise and make small changes to our daily behaviour that over time, and the more people who do them, can have a really, really big impact. And I think it's really easy to feel helpless in the face of a problem so big and to be waiting and waiting and waiting for the government to spend money, to put forward a plan, to do something. And, governments change and policies change and not everyone will agree. But what we can do is work at that personal level. And that's available to everybody.
Yeah, there's something about inspiration, isn't there? There's something about what, if I think about in my life about the times that I've done something that I wouldn't otherwise have done, or had a big revelation about how I should behave or a thing I should do. It's often come because something has sort of appeared to come sideways from somewhere, which just arrives in your brain as a revelation about, yes, that's the thing, that's what I should do. And you ain't going to get that if you just get up every day, get shepherded around the same places you're supposed to do in a nice orderly way, and you don't ever just go for a walk across the grass, metaphorically or actually speaking. Right?
Creatively, inspiration is about breathing in so you can breathe out.
Inspire.
If you think about it, if you break it down that way. And we often wait for inspiration to hit. We think something's going to come along. But if we just follow the same actions over and over again and becoming sort of blind to them, then we're not going to get that sudden change, that something different that glints and glimmers and draws our attention and encourages us to think differently. So therefore, in order to generate inspiration, we do need to get off the beaten track, and we do need to start looking and feeling and reconnecting with things and defamiliarizing things. And I think when you do that, you start breathing in different things. And when you breathe in different things, you can breathe out different things. We can make different choices and we can notice things. So that's what we need to do. Get outside, move differently, feel and read the world with our minds and our bodies and our eyes and all our senses, and breathe. We need to breathe.
Philippa, thank you very much for coming on Your Brain on Climate. Is your book out yet, your novel about all this stuff? And if not, what is it called? When is it coming out? And how can people find out more about you and read your thesis, What I Did? How about that?
The novel is coming out with Parthian Books in May. The review copies are going out soon. It's very exciting. It will be available for pre-order in the next couple of weeks. It's called The Half-Life of Snails, and it is a fiction novel. And it's split between the coast of Anglesey, where there's a nuclear power station and a new one being built, and the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And it's really unpicking how the legacy of Chernobyl and anxieties about living close to a nuclear power station, the risk of human error, have effects on people's behaviours, relationships, emotions. It's quite tense and a bit gritty, but hopefully also beautiful. So if and when you read it, I really hope you enjoy it. My thesis is available on the British Library Ethos system with a really boring title, but if you just Google my name, you'll find it.
I'll put it in the link in the show notes. It is good, and it's not like one of them theses what you're thinking of. This is actually really good to read, so listen to that. And are you on the social medias?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at the Jackdaw's Pen.
Psychogeography then. Told you. Still can't quite put my finger on it, but I know it's very profound, very French, it's weird, it's everything, and yet it's kind of, nothing. It's about just being alive in a way. But just being alive is about places where we live, our experience of being in the world on a day-to-day basis. And particularly over the last couple of years, I've been thinking about this, where you live is what really moves you. No one writes poetry, I suppose they do, but there's a lot less poetry written about abstract concepts than there is about actual tangible things, places and rivers and mountains and towns and cities and the people that live in them. And that's why people get upset about like sewage in the rivers, much more than they get upset about numbers on graphs, right? This is what home is. This is what me is. It doesn't have to be pretty, it often isn't, but it's ours. I'm here, it's me, I'm it, I'll fight for it. And round here, under lockdown and being at home and all that, the park near me has come to feel almost like a friend in a weird way. I definitely feel about it differently to a bit of land that I don't know. Every inch of it is somewhere I've walked. And even then, I've walked in particular ways on the paths and not on the private bits. And all of that just makes you think about the way in which even somewhere that I've come to imbue with a bit of a personality that feels like it's connected to me. Even then, I've only been experiencing it in the ways that I've been allowed to. It's just land, though, right? The thing that's really left me with that chat, though, is the best ideas happen, I think, certainly for me, right, when you disrupt the normal way of thinking. Someone comes along, someone or something comes along and goes, have you thought about it like this? And it just clicks, right? It's in your head. Bang. You're like, yes, that's it. The world makes sense because something outside has just kind of pushed you off your path, right? And then I think how many of the things that are causing climate change, look, behind power and behind fossil fuel companies and how they work, but, just the sort of day-to-day of the way that we're all part of it, how much of that is unthinking? It's kind of forced effectively on our behaviours by our environments, the towns, the cities, the fossil fuel infrastructure, the way of life that we have and the rules that govern them. But think about being in a supermarket, mundane example. Think about how the whole thing is designed to encourage you to spend more money, to encourage you to turn this way, to go past the things you don't need before you get to the things that you do need. And we consume because that's what we're geared to do, right? Physically and culturally. But it's really, really rare that I find myself stopping and going, do I even want this thing? Why am I here? Do I even want to be here? Why do I want this? And realising that somehow the place that I'm in and the environment I'm surrounded by has somehow nudged me, shepherded me into it. Thanks very much for listening to Your Brain on Climate. My name is Dave. If you like the show, please give it a share. Give it a review on your podcast medium of choice, though I think iTunes is the best one. 5-star review would be lovely, and some words. If you could write some words with your hands, that would be fab. Thank you again to Philippa for giving up her time. We recorded that a month or so ago, but I hope it's all still sort of relevant. Thank you for bearing with me as I had a few months off to get on with other stuff. But we're back now. This is going to be coming out every few weeks or so until I get bored of it. How about that? You can drop me a mail to let me know what you thought of the show. It's hello@yourbrainonclimate.com, and you can find me on Twitter @brainclimate. Right, that's it. I'm off. And, if you find yourself in the next couple of days walking around the same old streets, the same old lanes you always walk down, and you walk past something you always never give a second thought to, give a thought to it. If you see a little alley that you never thought about walking down, well, have a walk down it. You never know what ideas might be waiting for you down that alley, down there.